without further ado, I want to say, Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And if we can, if you'd like to kick off this our Zoom session, the first of our auctioneering masterclasses. Over to you. Thank you, Charlotte. Let me just get you unmuted. Pop it off mute. There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Hello, Charlotte.
Let's see. Hello, or can you see me?
Yes, yes.
Already. Okay. I'm honored this afternoon to be invited by Strauss and Company to speak about our close friendship with the late Jack and Helene Kahn. Can you hear me? Is that
perfect?
My late husband Louis and myself started the Kunstkammer in 1971. And one of our first visitors to the gallery were the late Jack and Helene. They were a modest and reserved couple, always showing interest in acquiring new art. They assembled a vast collection of important works by Irma, Boonzaier, Paul de Toy, Maggie Laubser, Ruth Prowse, Cecil Higgs, Eleanor Esmonde-White, May Hillhouse, Lippy Lipchitz, and many other artists from that era. They lived in an apartment in St. John's Road, Seapoint, and visiting their home was indeed a treat, to be surrounded by exquisite art and enjoying conversation with Jack and Helene. It was with great sadness in 2005 when Jack passed away. They left an outstanding collection, which was then auctioned by the late Stephen Wels in February 2007. Knowing the time that the collection was assembled, Louis and I were overwhelmed at the auction to witness the foundation for record prices by leading South African artists. This auction was the foundation for the future of South African art market. It was most gratifying and rewarding that the proceeds of this sale was donated to various charities, and they were able then to benefit from the amazing collection and the foresight of Jack and Helene. This proves that South African art has maintained record prices and at all times remains a worthy investment. I appreciate being part of this discussion today, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That's fantastic. And Annie, I'm going to pass over to you now. We're just going to unshare my screen and let you share the screen. So are you ready? I'm just going to stop sharing. There we go.
Screen.
There we go.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
There we go.
We're getting there.
Spot on.
Can you see?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So actually, the focus of my talk this afternoon is really to stress the benefit of keeping an art collection intact. When a collection comes up for auction, there seems to be a great temptation to split it up, to take out the eyes, which are the most important works, and leave the rest to be spread out and distributed amongst other sales. And there's no doubt whatsoever that the value of an art collection as a whole, which has been painstakingly put together for many years, is much greater than the sum of its parts. During the last 30 years, I've had the privilege of being involved in the sale of many major collections, but the one that particularly stands out was the collection of Jack and Helene Kahn in 2007. So Jack was a regular attendee in the auction rooms. He was very quiet, he didn't throw his weight around, he was very softly spoken, always beautifully dressed in a suit and a tie, polished shoes, and quite reserved. In those days, our offices were in Cape Town in Hout Street. And he used to pop in when he was in town, and I used to see him around. He was always very polite. I remember bumping into him one day. He and his wife were in Sam Newman Hardware, and we went and had a coffee. And he was a charming man, but very, very, in a way, quite shy. But when I took over the paintings department, Stefan Weltz, who was my boss and my mentor at the time, he said to me, he pulled me aside, he said, just keep an eye on Jack Kahn. And so I always wondered why he said that. But then one day I got a call from the Kahns, from Jack, saying, would I go to his flat in Sea Point to do evaluation? And I went, Ian Hunter and I went there. And I've been on loads of visits, hundreds of visits, but I'll never forget that particular one, because we drove to Sea Point, went up in the lift, quite not a fancy block of flats, quite an ordinary, sort of looking from the outside. And we went in, and we were just blown away by the amazing pictures that were hanging, one cheek by jowl, Irma Stern's, Gregoire's. I can't begin to describe how exciting it was to see so many wonderful works in a very modest setting, and no fanfare at all. They said, would you like some tea? And we had tea, and then we got on with the job of listing the works and doing the valuation. And then the time passed, and Jack sadly died in 2005. Helene died the following year. They had no children, so I think she was very sad when he died. And Stefan and Ian were very keen to get the collection for auction. And they had great trouble persuading the executors to keep the collection together. And that was the trouble. They wanted, we had dealers, we had all kinds of people phoning up, wanting this, that, and the other. And Stefan was adamant that we keep the collection. He said that is where the value will be, in keeping it and selling it as a whole. So we had already got an auction on that day in February, our main auction. But we decided, as we were awarded this collection, that we would make a special fanfare of it and have a catalogue, a separate catalogue, and a separate session of the sale. And at 8 o'clock in the evening, we would have the Kahn sale at the Kirstenbosch Convention Centre, which is where we used to have our sales in those days. So we set about cataloguing them, and we were very fortunate. Joe Wolpe, who a lot of people will remember, most familiar name in Cape Town art circles, a gallerist, artist, framer, art advisor, very kindly wrote the introduction to the catalogue. And it was appropriate because he'd known Jack since the 1930s. They were at school together. They went to Sachs School in Cape Town. And Jack Kahn's father ran a candle factory, the Orient Candle Factory, which was in Rowland Street. And in the adjacent grounds, there was a dilapidated old house, which was used to make the candles. And Wolf Kibel and Lippy Lipschitz, who were two artists, impoverished artists, they lived there, worked there. Sometimes they were so poor, they used the candle, the paper that was used to wrap the candles. They used that as art materials. So I've even got a picture of the Palm Studios. This isn't actually part of the collection, but I thought it was an appropriate work to put on. It's a Lippy Lipschitz picture, which he did of the Palm Studios in the 1930s when they were busy working there, when they had no money at all. I'm just going to quote a little bit from Joe's introduction. That Kahn was advised by kinsman and a close friend and mentor, Solly Disner. And Disner was, to a great extent, mentor to distinguished artist Paul du Toit. And you'll see there were quite a lot of Paul du Toits in the collection. Disner considered him to be among the very best local painters of his generation. With Disner's guidance and Kahn's own discernment, excellent taste and enthusiasm, the collection hanging in Kahn's modest Sea Point apartment was of consistently high quality and provided Jack and his wife tremendous enjoyment. Kahn avoided publicity of any kind, but he was generous enough to lend many of his pictures to galleries for retrospective exhibitions and for illustrations in art books and so forth. Seeing this outstanding collection again has been a glorious and stimulating trip down memory lane. I have been transported back 50 years, this is Joe talking, to the days when I was involved in creative framing, and it was highly evocative, seeing several superb pictures, paintings which I had had the privilege of framing. So that was the introduction to the catalogue, and it was a tremendous start, and we were all raring to go, but nothing prepared us for what we had in store that night. The conference centre, which was already, you know, we'd had the sale on during the day, so there were plenty of people around, but when 8 o'clock came, the car park was full, the people were pouring in, we didn't have enough seats, we had to pull back the screens. Bina reminded me that we'd had this furniture from the afternoon sale all stacked behind screens, and we had to pull them apart, and the people, so they could have somewhere to sit. It was just absolutely electrifying. And of course, then along came Stefan in his DJ. And of the 46, there were 46 works on the sale. And the estimate of the sale was 6 to 10 million. So we certainly hope to get the mid estimate, which was about 8.5 million. And I have to tell you that the sale, in total, we got, it was a white glove sale, sold everything, and we cleared 22,933,000, just short of 24 million. 13 records were broken, and some of them are still standing today. So I found a copy of the catalogue at home, and I went through it, and I took some pictures from the catalogue, so I'm afraid the images are not good, but I just thought it would give you an idea of the kind of works that we had on that sale and how much they fetched. So here we go. This was a start, a little Constance Penstone. Estimate 3 to 5, sold for 22. So that was already an amazing kickoff, not one. This one, Tinus de Jongh. Yes, Ian?
No, I was going to say what a start
Yes.
that was. I mean, we'd been selling those Constance Penston watercolors and perhaps doing 2.5 or 3 or 4,000, and we put in a 3 to 5, just fairly small but very, very jewel-like, very rich use of watercolor, sort of luminous quality to it. But running at 10 times, essentially 10 times over its low estimate, it was a remarkable start.
It was an amazing start. I mean, we sort of gasped, you know, lot one, but that was only the first. Then the second one, a very nice Tinus de Jongh, quite unusual for him, a deep river. I went up and down this road endlessly trying to find this exact spot. But of course, Deep River has changed immeasurably over the years. But anyway, that was Deep River at the time. 25 to 35,000, sold for 95. So, I mean, things were beginning to happen. There's one picture I put in here. This is on our current online sale, which is running at the moment. And it's also, I like it because it's a sort of historic picture of the time, same sort of period. This is the Rhodes cottage in Musenberg, which is in at 4,000 to 6,000 rand. It's you know, it's still there, that cottage, but of course this road is now just, you know, full of traffic and quite changed. But I included it because it was part of the period. And this one also, 12 Apostles, Tinus de Jongh. Look how lovely it was in those days. Not a block of flats, not a hotel, just, you know, just the pristine mountain. But of course the coastline's the same. Next one was a Volschenk, 18 to 24. sold for 58. He did a lot of these landscapes around the Riversdale area. There's a couple coming up here on our sale that's running at the moment. Anybody know that area? He really manages to capture the light, the sky, and the beautiful, beautiful works. Another one. All dirt roads, of course. 30 to 50. Now that's on sale at the moment. Anybody interested in buying a Volschenk? I love this too, Ruth Prowse. This is the Cape Town station. In the days of the good old steam age, look at the steam engines. All the trains had steam, of course, in those days. I don't know how many people remember that. But anyway, 220,000, that was a record for a Ruth Prowse at the time.
And Annie, that just, but what a work it was too. I mean, we'd seen Ruth Prowse's before, and in previous catalogs. I mean, I started in 2001, but I hadn't seen any sort of street studies quite from her best period of production. And this was just a glowing example.
There's such movement, isn't there, in it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it almost feels like an extra from the kind of Parisian in time of probably the post-impressionists, wouldn't you say?
Very much so. No, I loved it. Anyway, it's my kind of picture. Then there were a couple of Gwello Goodmans. They also did very well. Edinburgh Castle and a little landscape there. I'm sorry, you can see there's a little hole at the top of some of the pages because the catalogue I was using, it was an exhibition one from the hall, and we had to tie them to the tables. So I'm afraid I couldn't edit out all the holes, so that's why there's a hole, a punch hole. Nita Spilhaus sold for 75,000. Very good result on that. Jonch's Hook, which of course we know, Stellenbosch Mountains. This is a Nita Spilhaus that's currently on sale at the moment. Very nice portrait of a chap smoking a pipe. I just put that in because it shows the versatility of Nita Spilhaus. She did a lot of beautiful trees of the Constantia area, but she could also do very good portraits. And I like this. This is also, it's just a little etching that's on our sale now, but it caught my eye because it's exactly the same scene that the Tinus de Jongh painting is of. Only this, of course, is an etching at about, fraction price. But look at it, not a building anywhere. Okay, then this was the Maggie that was on our cover of our catalogue. Fisherman with Boats. We had it in at 500 to 800,000, and it fetched 1.2 million, which was a very good result. There was actually a painting on the back of that work. Do you remember, Ian? I think it was.
Yeah, it was a study of ducks on the reverse. Let me just see if I can find it in my catalogue, and I'll hold it up just briefly.
So we had two. You got two for the price of one. There you go. That's right. I think she preferred the Fisherman.
Yeah, and this and the next lot were also from probably one of the best periods of her production from 1936.
That's lovely. Yes.
Yeah, she took part in the Empire exhibition in 1936, and she probably was at the top of her power at that stage, sort of marrying iconography and style.
Now this has got a line down the middle because the page was folded over. Some of the pictures were so big, well they were that format that we didn't want to trim them down to fit the page. So we had fold over, so that's why there's that crease in the middle. That did very well, 800,000. Here's a lovely Hugo Naude, the quiver trees, 900,000, that was the high estimate. They were doing rather well at the time, weren't they? Those ones.
Yeah, but that's an exceptional one. It's a big one too. And
it's also got a crease down the middle, so it's qualified.
But you get a sense that this picture could have gone on quite panoramic. It could have been doubled in size. As a sort of viewer, I sort of want to walk through this picture and go to that back hillside over there and sort of, it's like a pioneer. If you can kind of quantify the distances, he's very good as a descriptive painter.
It is. I love it. No, I wonder who's got it. I, of course, don't remember who bought all these things. Another Hugo Naude, very popular subject for him, isn't it? He, you know, these Namaqualand springtime with the flowers always seem to be very popular at auction.
Yeah.
Lots of colour. Lovely work.
Yeah, I think it's
600,000. Double the high. Look at all these, you know, I mean, you can see what's happening. I mean, the sale was progressing and we just couldn't believe what was happening. There was this kind of wave of enthusiasm and we just couldn't, the hands were going up, the bids were coming in, and it was just one of those magic nights, really.
Yeah, sorry, Annie, but what's also so interesting about this collection, they had works from different periods of the artist's production. And with Naude, you've got these beautiful sort of impressionistic pictures that were developed after his visit to England, 1912-13. He came back with this kind of post-impressionist and impressionist experience, which heightened his palette. And you have this flickering and dancing brushwork. The works before, which we'll see in the next slide, are a lot more somber and academic, more Slade school in their construction.
Exactly. But of course, so many South African artists went to Europe and came back completely influenced and changed and inspired, if you like, but didn't they, at that time?
Yeah,
I mean,
but he was probably the sorry, Annie. He's probably the forerunner of them. He went overseas to study in the 1880s.
Yes, he did. Venice. There are those lovely pictures of Venice we've had. This one is actually from one of his trips. This is on the current sale. It's the only Naude we've got at the moment on sale, but it's a nice little one of a street scene in Utrecht. So I just put that in to just show you the kind of work, you know. Naude wasn't a great one for figures, really, but he manages to capture the atmosphere in this little narrow street. So it's rather charming work, 20 to 30,000. Anybody wants a Hugo Naude? So this one was actually the star of the show. She was in at 1 to 1.4 million, Indian woman. Sold for 6.6 million. So you can imagine what was going on in the room as we crept up 1 million, 1.5, 2, and so it went. And when we got to 6.6, that was it. It was a record, and that was the stern, in my mind anyway, it was one of those breakthrough moments where we actually felt South African art is on its way. Irma Stern is in a way leading the way, and that was in 2007. Beautiful, beautiful picture.
And
Another one. Sorry.
And also, like Maggie Laubser, you've got works from Irma from the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, and different styles of work and different brackets of collectors. And the works, of course, from the 1930s. This one from 36. It's kind of her also really at the top of her game.
Yes, that's right. Well, I didn't put in all the information. I thought we were going to bore people silly with dates and things, but it's interesting that you mention the dates because they are relevant to what's going on here. Here's another portrait, Irma Stern, 3.6 million, Pondo woman. Quite different from the previous one, but amazing. Look at that face.
Yeah, and Annie, because we had the regular catalogue to produce and also the Kahn catalogue, my wife Kate and I, Kate was an art writer, and we actually put together all the written texts for these pieces. So we used existing literature in addition to intuiting or reading between the lines. In the case with this traditional healer, well, we gathered that she's a traditional healer by her dress and the turquoise and blue beading around her neck, along with the white vestments that all point towards her being a traditional healer. Made the researching so much fun.
Yeah. No, you can get totally carried away doing the research. I love it. That's one of my favorite things, but we have work to do, so we have to, you know, get on with it. This is a still life. Sold for 1.7 million. Very colourful pineapples and gladioli and all sorts of things there. Lovely, lovely still life. And another one here. This interested me that it's got a glass ashtray. Sort of think, you know, in the days of Irma Stern, an ashtray was kind of considered something to put in a still life. You know, today with the smoking ban, nobody needs ashtrays. But I suppose
it's probably lead crystal, Annie.
I don't know if she smoked. Charlotte, you might know. Did Irma Stern smoke? Do you think? Oh, she's mute.
Not to my knowledge.
Anyway, I mean, everybody had ashtrays around the house. Everybody smoked in those days, didn't they? They didn't give you cancer then. They just made you look cool. Anyway, that was a great success, that one. Here we come into some beautiful Gregoire Boonzaiers. I think he really liked painting backyards more than the frontage of houses. He seems to love these sort of tin roofs and gnarled trees, and it was also quite a big one, so we got another crease in the middle of that one. But
talk
about half a million.
Yeah, talk about making your life difficult as an artist, painting a subject like this with all these repeating different angles of roofs vanishing off into the distance. It's an absolute technical nightmare, but he kind of borrowed from the European tradition, people like Cézanne and Braque, who would have been exposed to on his, particularly in the 1930s when he studied in England.
Yes, I know. And who would think that you could make such a lovely picture out of all those different bits of corrugated iron and different painted doors? But it was a lovely work. I haven't seen it again. I don't know where it's disappeared to. I hope the people who bought some of these works are watching. They might like to see them again. Okay, sunny Spain, 360,000 rand. So, you know, over the high estimate. One of Gregoire's pictures of Spain, there's another one here. Also did very well. Look at that, 340,000 from an estimate of 60 to 90.
And these are so rare, Annie. These are so rare because once he after studying at the Heatherley School of Art in 1935 and then the Central School of Art in London, he traveled first to Cornwall and then away to Spain for a while. And this is where he kind of implemented his training, and his style kind of echoed very much his Cape subjects, but in a very exotic and unique locality. I would think quite a brave guy to be there during the Spanish Civil War too.
Exactly. No, I haven't seen. Fun. I always associate these Spanish houses with the Kahns. I don't think I've seen any more anywhere else.
They're very rare.
But I remember these two very clearly. This is another Gregoire. This is a watercolor.
Mm.
Yes.
No, I said maybe if one of the people watching has got a Spanish landscape, we'd love to see it.
Yes, I would too. Anyway, that's a bit like the other one, but this is a watercolor, but very, very, very atmospheric. These trees, oak trees in the winter time. Here's a lovely nude by Jongh. Did very well. We've got a nude drawing on the online sale. Cecil Higgs, still life. Of course, Higgs was a great, the Higgs was very friendly with the Welts family, weren't they? They
yes.
seem to know each other, and we always seem to put them together. They seem to go well together in the catalogues or in the when we're doing an exhibition. They seem to complement each other, don't they?
Yeah, and I think from their close friendship too, I think Cecil Higgs picked up quite a lot of the stylistic solutions that Jean Veltz offered to paintings, using abstraction and close observation to create a painting that not only is enigmatic but just incredibly beautiful too.
Quite. Look how well this did. 10 to 15, sold for 46,000. Another one, Cavan. Another one. Oh, this is on our sale at the moment. This is more terrible. I'm sorry, it's such a blurry picture, but this is more the kind of stuff that you see more of, sort of shells and sea pools of water and sand and stuff. That's very much, to me, typical of a Higgs. I like these still lives. I think they're lovely. Very restful. Okay, so Maurice van Essche. We had this one, 80 to 120, sold for 400,000. 400,000. And the next one, 60 to 90, sold for 400,000.
Yeah.
So they both broke the record for Van Essche. Then they both reached 400. I mean, it's subsequently been broken by other works, but don't forget, this is 13 years ago, 2007. That was a pretty good result. We were thrilled with that. Another Van Essche, it's like this was just a drawing.
And
even that got 55. A very good result on that for what's quite a sketchy sort of work.
Sure. And when we were researching these pictures too, it was so interesting because I hadn't done a lot of research on some of the artists. And Van Essche, the fact that when he had finished at art school, he actually worked as an apprentice in a stained glass studio initially, and then later a wallpaper studio. So he was all about creating images with strong graphic power, and the strong use of black outlines and design is very evident in these pictures, and the kind of heroic monumental proportion. So it was so exciting to read up on those things and see it come to life in front of you.
Exactly, after all your hard work. Well, but that's so typical of his work, isn't it, Ian? He did a lot of these.
Yes.
Monumental figures. I can imagine them being very good in a stained glass window. They're just the right. They're not too not too fiddly in detail. Okay, what's next? So there's the Esmonde-White. Mother, look at that, 20 to 30,000, sold for 320,000, which was a record for an Eleanor Esmonde-White. Amazing. I mean, she does lovely pictures of figures, Greek women and great pickers and so forth, but also covers a lot of families, children and mothers, and lovely, lovely work.
But earlier when you were talking about how a collection should be sold all together as one piece or unit, I think that's so important because the collectors, they seem to get the excitement we felt going into that apartment. They felt taking part in this auction and actually acquiring some of these pieces that have been so lovingly collected. Exactly. So these remarkable results also, I think, demonstrate how the collection or the collective grouping of the works adds so much significance, and the prices reflect that.
Exactly. We would never have got these prices if we'd offered 2 or 3 here and 1 or 2 there. It wouldn't have been the same. It was like a big wave of that, sort of everybody wanted a piece of it, you know. It was like a memory. This is a lovely May Hill house of all these women round a fruit barrow. That was also a record, 160,000 rand. For a hill house. Very, very good result.
Yeah, that's a great example. If you can find them from the 40s and the 50s, those are the ones that the true Cape collectors are looking for.
Absolutely. Look at the shoes. You can see that's the period. Those shoes were fashionable with hats. Everybody wore a hat in the 50s. Oh my goodness. lovely Gregoire, 550,000. That was a record too of this house with the peach tree blossom. Beautiful work. Another little Gregoire of a landscape. Sorry, you can see the page is a bit sort of bent, but it's a very nice, looking towards False Bay. Still, I suppose, looks a bit like that if you to go along.
Yeah. On Macassar Beach Drive, it looks like that when you drive along between Muizenberg and Somerset West. And in 1928, he was 19 years old, and he would have he wasn't tutored at that stage. He hadn't gone overseas. He'd been exposed to some of the contemporary artists like Benning and Spilhaus and Kotler, etc. And you can see the influence of Benning in this picture. But it's really interesting to note that from 1926 onwards, he was making enough money to survive off his own art, and would later take a studio in Cape Town on the successes of his sales.
Yes, quite right. It is I can see the vending influence very much. Wolf Kibel. I think Jack Kahn was, interested in Kibel's works, particularly because of the candle factory and all that. And Kibel, of course, did a lot of these, he was a Polish refugee, wasn't he? And he did a lot of, I think he experienced some terrible things in Poland before he fled to.
Yeah, but it's a remarkable picture in that, firstly, it's signed, a watercolor that's signed by him. So many were in the studio that were authenticated by his wife. But this is such a wonderful picture, and it's also using Rodin's thinker, well, what appears to be in this highly claustrophobic and nervy composition, which is at some stages, it just kind of shrieks.
It does. There's another one of a nude, sold for 52,000. Just a little drawing, really. A couple of Kibels on the current sale. Just a little drawing of a woman, 8 to 12. That's on our online sale at the moment. Here's a still life. You can't see, but this is signed by the widow. A lot, as Ian was saying, it's rare to get a Wolf Kibel signed. He didn't sign all his works. His wife signed them after he died. But, you can see very much the Kibel style. This is a nice lippy, Lipschitz. 3 to 5,000, sold for 25,000. It was a record, and it was bought by the National Gallery as it was then. It's now in the Ezeco art collection. Room to let. Lippy sculpture. Record 32,000. This is a nice little lippy. I just popped that in. That's on sale at the moment. Very nice little torso, 10 to 15,000 on our online sale. It's really a pleasing work. It's just small but lovely.
Yeah, he's one of those major artists. I mean, he was a co-founder of the New Group. He was a major sort of shaker and mover, kept abreast with international trends, made works in all different styles throughout his long career. And well, it remains to be seen, but these values should really come up because they're very beautiful, sensitive pieces.
Exactly. It's a really nice little work. It's just, small, just about 20 centimeters or so, but it's very pleasing. I like it. Okay, so here come the Paul de Toys. I think there are about 10 of them, and they're very typical. He did these sort of autumnal landscapes, used a lot of these autumnal. But that record lasted for about 2 minutes, because 2 minutes later, we sold another one, 160, and that was a record. So records were just tumbling that night. These lovely Paul de Toys, which of course he would have bought because he was very fond of Paul du Toit's work, and I think because of Solly Disner's recommendations that he focused on those.
And Jean Veltz was such a mentor to Paul du Toit. In 1946 and 47, he tutored him and taught him so much about removing what wasn't necessary in a painting and keeping it enigmatic and beautiful through kind of focusing on, just the strongest parts of the picture. And that one that made 160 on the next leaf, Annie, that one too. You can almost sense Jean Veltz in that one too. It's very mysterious. There's beautiful drawing and draftsmanship, but also enough to keep you guessing.
Quite. No, they were fabulous pictures, and of course we were just flying. We were absolutely flying. A couple more Paul du Toit's, 90,000 for this fragmentation. This is just a little drawing, Paul du Toit drawing, and another watercolor. But even that, 3,000 to 5,000. We'd have been glad to get 5. Sold for 32,000. And this is the last one, Maud Sumner, Battersea Bridge. Fabulous work. Sold for 320,000. So there you go. That was the Kahn sale. A real unforgettable night for us all. And I think, as I said just at the beginning, those prices were fabulous, but I'm convinced that they were achieved because the collection was sold as a whole. And I think that's why I still stress always that we must keep collections together if possible. And as Charlotte mentioned earlier, just so in case you didn't hear, the money raised, the 22 million or whatever it was, 23 million, went to charities. So it was all worth it. So has anybody got anything else that they want to say, or any questions or anything? How are we doing for time, Matt?
So I think we're still good. So it's quite a nice opportunity because I've got, thanks so much, Annie. That was really fantastic, and I've definitely got 1 or 2 observations and questions, I suppose, about really kicking off from what you were saying now about the fact that you doubt if these had been offered singularly, spaced throughout an auction. It's really, I suppose, collections bring with them a package, but also in terms of what they do for other collectors. That's what I'm interested in, is the amount of, I suppose, and it's really fantastic looking at the Paul du Toit's at the end, because that just shows you that, one would think putting so many close together would obliterate the chances of them to perform. But then at the end of the night, they all performed. What is it about, I suppose, seeing good works close together that gives you a sense, an even board? Like the Irma Stearns, for example, they've got 3 examples. Many other artists, Wolf Kibel, for instance, he was collecting a number of these works. Does that help collectors measure works against each other?
Can I say?
Well, we don't normally. Okay, yes, carry on.
Well, yeah. I was just gonna throw in there that I think that it's about connoisseurship, Matt, with regards to the Kahn's collection. Not only had they bought from very good dealers like Louis and Charlotte, and of course been assisted by Disner and probably Joe Walpy too. So these works, I'm sure that provenance and that connoisseurship added a lot to the fact. And when you get near the end of a sale, those people who haven't got what they were after, I think there is a little bit of a race to pick up something, because you want to be part of that magic.
I think so. I mean, we don't normally put all the artists, together. I mean, we don't put a whole row of Stearns together or a whole row of any particular artist together. We usually space them out, especially the Stearns, to give people a kind of breather. between one stern and another. But because these were all part of one collection, it sort of made sense to kind of group them together like that. It's interesting that you noticed that, because it wouldn't have been the same if we'd put like a hall du toit at the beginning and then one in the middle and then one, you know, like that. I think they had more impact in a way because they ran one after the other. I don't know, we must have discussed it at length to come up with how to catalogue them, you know.
Yeah, well, Annie, we did at the beginning of the tutorials, we did put into context how he met Jean Veltz and his different periods of production and some notes about that to follow them through. And we did them chronologically.
I mean, the catalogue was like a book, you know, so each page had text. It had, or not each, but most of them. I mean, Ian and Kate went to a lot of trouble to write beautiful pieces on most of the artists, and of course, so it made interesting reading, and it was in context.
Yeah, I think that made a difference too. That they were kind of researched articles on which we weren't doing up till then. We were pretty much putting paintings thematically in the catalogs, etc. But we weren't doing the write-ups as such. But we hadn't got such a fantastic assortment in one session ever before.
No,
well, not for me.
No, well, quite. No, I think that was an exceptional sale. But I know Stefan always used to say to start the sale off with a fairly low value thing, because he said if people are late and they haven't found parking and they're in a panic, you know, you might, you know, they haven't sort of settled down, so you don't want to go and put like an Irma Stern as lot number one, you know, because you haven't got, but you might not have all the punters in for the first lot. Although I think in this instance people were there so early, we were flying, absolutely. Yeah, I can't believe it's so long ago.
Well, speaking about that, actually, I've got two questions. We've got one from the audience, but just before that, I suppose I wanted to go back to my original sort of the germ of my question, which was, suppose in terms of South African auctioneering history, and for a sale that you were involved in putting together, how did this, I suppose, set the scene and set the tone for South African collections competing with international works? Because they're like, or I suppose also paved the way for these monumentous values that we would see coming later in the Irma Stern market. What kind of impact do you think did this make itself felt, or how did it make itself felt?
Well, I would suggest that it made a huge impact. It completely set, you know, I mean, don't forget, South African art was really, nobody really knew much about it. In the early 90s, I mean, I started working, well, Vanessa will remember, you know, I started in 1990. Well, that's 30 years ago. Now, South African art was because of the politics and apartheid and everything, South Africa was sort of, you know, people didn't want to have too much to do with South Africa. And art was, you know, it didn't feature, I wouldn't say, certainly not internationally. I mean, people locally were buying art, the South Africans with homes and nice, you know, wanted to have nice things. I mean, thank goodness they did. They did support the auction rooms. But I remember when we first sold a painting for R1 million, you know, well, one of the first sales I worked on, the whole sale, we only got R1 million for the whole sale. That was everything, all the pictures and the furniture and everything, the silver, the works. So, you know, things were, of course, the money was worth much, well, it was worth more than a rand, it's worth more than it is today. But, you know, Stefan said, if people had put their money into South African art in the early 90s, that would have paid better dividends or would have appreciated more the value than any other asset you could name. And that's including the stock market, including property, including, well, anything you like to mention. Stefan gave a very good talk once, I remember, with all the facts and figures of what had actually happened to the South African art market. So it started on a slow sort of trajectory, and I think the Kahn sale gave it a real kick. And we didn't have to be apologetic about South African art. I mean, we were up there. And then, of course, the international auction houses started sniffing around. We had, you know, Sotheby's, Christie's, Bonham, and they all were busy trying to climb into the South African art market. And we, you know, rightly so. I mean, we welcome the competition, and they're still doing it with great success. Yeah. But we like to think that South African art, or in fact, we know that it sells best here. And that's, you know, another thing that it's very hard to convince people. They're very beguiled by the attraction of a work going over to Bond Street and the London sale rooms and all the glamour and everything of that. But of course, the London auction rooms, they take a much bigger commission than we do, and you've got to pay all the shipping and the insurance and the packing and the la la la. So we've been very fortunate that the South African art market in the last 30 years, which is how long I've been doing it, may it continue. I think it will continue. You know, things level off a bit. I mean, now, of course, it's perhaps a slightly difficult time. It's probably a buyer's market at the moment because everybody's sort of drawing breath to see what's going to happen next. But I think it'll recover, and I'm sure of it. I mean, to me, I'm very positive about the South African art market.
You know, an interesting observation, Annie, that in this most recent sale that we've just had, our catalogue sale in Cape Town, Cape Town, but we also had auctioneers going in Joburg, and so it was a cross-provincial auction. But we sold the Gregoire Boonzaier for 400,000 Rand, and it was it's interesting because on the Kahn sale we also we hit the 400,000 Rand mark with the Boonzaier. So I think that's just quite an interesting indicator of of bookending. Boonzaier almost has become an index by himself when people are getting the good ones. It's quite interesting, that how they come up at these moments in time, and he's quite a consistent artist. I think I've really over the past couple of Zoom talks where we've had specialists opening up, speaking about artists that very often we overlook. It's been quite fascinating to see him, and the examples particularly on this. So I mean, that is just an exquisite picture in my estimation, and I've often made the observation that pictures of this class in this period in South African history can this work could quite easily hang in an impressionist gallery abroad. These artists
absolutely.
And I suppose also what's quite fascinating, and what this sale I suppose exposes in sort of conclusion is, I suppose a canonical kind of reception of really good pictures. And as we said, the title of the sale was Highly Important Pictures. I think it definitely made an impression. Annie, just before we get off, there was one more question that was asked by Wilhelm, and he just wanted to know, were you involved in the Ben and Cecilia Jaffe collection?
No, before my time, believe it or not. I've been no, I would have loved to have been, but occasionally works crop up from their collection. In fact, I think that Edward Wolfe tray that we sold on the sale last week was from their collection. But a few, well, of course, they were legendary. the Jaffes. Did you know them, Charlotte?
Just unmute, Charlotte. Thanks. Oh, Charlotte, we've just got to unmute you.
Hang on.
There we go.
Just a second, Charlotte. We can't hear you.
There she is.
I was present at that sale, but we also visited them on Sunday nights when they had an open house, and they attracted people from far and wide at their home, serving wonderful food and having soirees. And they were a remarkable family. They led the way also. Their auction was also the beginning of the rise of the market.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago. Because next year, the celebration of the Kinscom will be 50 years. So we would have been next year 50 years in art.
Fantastic.
I was privileged to be there.
We'll have to have a glass of champagne.
That's going to have to be a masterclass all on its own. It's actually a wonderful material, and I think just an illustration of how this section is going to grow. So I think I'm going to use this opportunity on the stroke of 5 to thank you, Charlotte, for joining us and giving us a wonderful introduction.
Pleasure.
It's always fantastic to hear firsthand from people that have had such a long and big role to play in the lives of these pictures that we're seeing, and you really have done that. So that's incredible. Thank you for joining us there, and Annie and Ian, and it's always a absolute pleasure to listen to you. And each time, even though we talk about these things so often, there are new observations, and I suppose because of pictures, there are endless opportunities to learn new things, and you really brought this sale alive. So thank you so much. And Ian, again, thanks so much also for your contributions. I think the knowledge about how we can contextualize these pictures in terms of the artist's lives, and how these are really peak periods. These works represent peak periods that the Kahns had such a fantastic eye to collect, is really makes, I suppose, the texture of the talk entirely richer. So thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. Quickly, I'd like to just keep everybody in the loop for what's happening for the remainder of the week, for the rest of our Zoom program. So we are back at 4 o'clock, same time, same place, with the same Zoom link number. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about we're introducing another new section, and that's going to be called Museum Moments. And we are in an effort to reach out to our fellow constituents, which are the museums where we ultimately would love our works to land up. We strive to handle works of museum quality. We really those are the fantastic works that we love to deal with. So we thought let's give a moment to the museums. So with our Museum Moments section, tomorrow is going to be reflections joined by the curators from the Vault collection. That is our joint exhibition at the University of Stellenbosch Museum in collaboration with the University of Fort Hare Museum, two of the oldest collections in the country. And we're going to have the curators from the Vault, which took place earlier this year as part of the Stellenbosch Triennial. So we're going to be featuring the curator, Kanyisile Mbongwa, joined by Tim tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we've got another very special guest. We're going to be joined by Jack Ginsberg in conversation with Wilhelm van Rensburg, speaking about the artist book and portfolio, and collecting the artist book and portfolio, as well as like Annie did today, which Annie, it was really fantastic. I suppose it brought the sale to me alive to me. We're going to be looking at some of the examples of the artist book and portfolios of the current online sale, and then finally, on Friday, we like to keep it light and bright and a little bit of exercise for the specialists. We're going to have 10 minutes each cross-department. So we're going to be joined by Hugo Jacobs, who's going to talk to us about the Cape Heritage theme inspired by Chenin Blanc and Pinotage. Then Dr. Alistair Meredith and Jean Leclerc-Theron are going to talk us through some of the modern paintings and pictures and works on paper that we've got on to offer. Sophie Louise Froelich from the Decorative Arts Department is going to be talking to us about silver and